The crystal chandeliers of Ethelgard Manor cast fractured light across the ballroom where 243 women waited to change their lives. All Vance was not one of them. She sat in the far corner of the room, half hidden behind a massive potted palm, wearing the only formal dress she owned, a black size XXL that she'd bought 3 years ago for a co-worker's funeral. The fabric pulled slightly across her stomach when she sat, so she'd learned to angle her body toward the wall, making herself as small as possible, which was of course impossible. At nearly 200 pounds, she had never been small. Just blend in and don't touch anything unless there's an emergency, her supervisor at the insurance company had instructed that morning. The Thorns are our biggest client. Don't embarrass us. So here she was, the invisible guardian of a pocket watch worth more than her apartment building, watching the most elaborate husband-hunting ritual in modern American history unfold before her eyes. The candidates had been arriving for the past hour, each one more stunning than the last. Models glided across the marble floor in gowns that cost more than an annual salary, their hair glossy, their smiles practiced, their bodies the exact shape that society had deemed acceptable. Era watched them the way she watched everything, from a distance, with the clinical detachment of someone who had long ago accepted that certain doors would never open for her. That's when she spotted him. Cameras flashed as he entered, a tall man with dark hair and the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers. Elias Thorne, 34 years old, heir to the Thorne fortune, the most eligible bachelor in America. People gravitated toward him like moths to flame, eager to share his spotlight. "Mr. Thorne, over here," called photographers, while wealthy mothers positioned their daughters in his sightline. Bara glanced at the display case across the room, checking that the chronos was still secure. It was her job to watch the watch, not the spectacle. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages. Anything to look occupied. Pathetic, isn't it? Era looked up. A woman in her 50s, dripping with diamonds, had paused near the potted palm. She wasn't speaking to Era. She was speaking to her companion, another society matron with champagne in hand. "Which part?" the companion asked. "All of it. 200 girls throwing themselves at a man who clearly doesn't want to be here." The woman's eyes swept across the room and landed briefly on Era. "Though I suppose some people will do anything for money, even humiliate themselves." They moved on laughing. Ara's face burned. She knew the comment wasn't really about the candidates. It was about her, the fat girl in the cheap dress taking up space she hadn't earned. "Don't react. Don't draw attention. Just do your job." She focused on the chronos visible through its glass case. Even from across the room, she could appreciate its beauty. The gold case, the intricate engravings, the tourbillon mechanism visible through the crystal back. It was a masterpiece of 19th-century engineering created by Elias Thorne's great-great-grandfather. She had read everything about it. The Breguet overcoil technique, the hand-painted enamel dial, the way the balance wheel oscillated exactly 21,600 times per hour. Most people saw a pretty antique. Era saw a story, a genius clockmaker's love letter to precision, preserved across 130 years. Broken things had always spoken to her. Maybe because she felt broken herself. The evening progressed according to some invisible script. Candidates were introduced to Elias one by one, each conversation lasting exactly 90 seconds before an assistant intervened. Era timed them. 90 seconds to make an impression. 90 seconds to audition for the role of Mrs. Thorne. Elias's face remained polite but empty throughout. The practiced smile of a man who had stopped expecting anything real. "He looks exhausted," Era thought, then pushed the observation aside. His feelings weren't her concern. By 10:30 p.m., she had counted 17 instances of guests handling the decorative artifacts incorrectly and made detailed notes for her report. Her feet ached. Her back hurt from sitting on a chair designed for someone half her size. She was calculating how much longer until she could leave when a scream, not a scream exactly, more like a collective gasp, followed by the shattering of glass. Era was on her feet before she registered moving. Her eyes found the chronos display case, or what was left of it. A woman in a pink gown stood frozen beside the wreckage, her heel caught in a service cord, her hand still extended from where she had grabbed the display for balance. The chronos lay on the marble floor in pieces. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "That's the chronos. It's destroyed. Someone call I didn't mean to, the woman in pink stammered. I tripped. Staff members rushed forward with brooms and dustpans. Ara's stomach dropped. Stop. The word tore from her throat before she could think. She pushed through the crowd, her size suddenly an advantage as people scrambled to get out of her way. Don't touch it. She dropped to her knees beside the scattered components, not caring that her dress rode up, not caring that 200 people were staring at the fat girl sprawled on the floor. If you sweep this up, you'll destroy the hairspring. It's thinner than a human hair. Silence. Ara pulled the emergency kit from her bag, the one she carried everywhere, the one her coworkers mocked her for. White cotton gloves, surgical tweezers, a jeweler's loop. Her hands moved automatically, years of training taking over. What is she doing? Someone muttered. Is that the insurance person? She's going to make it worse. She blocked them out. The tourbillon cage was bent, but not broken. The mainspring had partially uncoiled. 3 screws had come loose from the base plate. The balance wheel. She held her breath, examining it through the loop. The balance wheel was intact. It could be saved. Come on, she murmured to the scattered parts. Show me what happened to you. She worked in silence, her fingers steady despite her pounding heart. Stabilize the mainspring first. Secure the loose screws. Realign the tourbillon cage with gentle, precise pressure. 60 seconds. When she finally looked up, the first thing she saw was a pair of handmade Italian shoes. She looked higher. Elias Thorne stood directly in front of her, his expression unreadable. You repositioned the tourbillon, he said. That's a brigade overcoil technique. How do you know it? Ara's cheeks flushed. She was suddenly aware of how she must look. Sweaty, disheveled, kneeling on the floor like a servant. I work with antiques for the insurance company. I'm supposed to be watching. Not you saved it. I stabilized it. There's still significant damage. It will need weeks of proper restoration. Elias crouched down, putting himself at her eye level. Up close, she could see the fatigue etched around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He looked like a man who had been performing for so long that he'd forgotten what his real face looked like. What's your name? He asked. Ara Vance. Ara, he said it like he was tasting something new. Can you fix it completely? Yes, given enough time and proper equipment. He stood abruptly and turned to face the room. 200 women in designer gowns stared back at him, their faces a mixture of confusion and anticipation. The event is over, Elias announced. Everyone out. The gasps were audible. Margaret Chen, the event coordinator, stepped forward. Mr. Thorne, your grandmother specifically. My grandmother can speak to me directly. Everyone else, thank you for coming. Good night. It took 15 minutes for the ballroom to empty. Ara remained on the floor, carefully gathering the Chronos components onto a velvet cloth, trying to make sense of what was happening. When the last guest had departed, Elias returned to her side. Miss Vance, he said, I'd like to hire you. Ara blinked. I already have a job. Not as a watchdog for insurance claims. As a restoration specialist. He paused. There's something in this house I need you to find. A document that may or may not exist, hidden somewhere in a century's worth of family archives. Everyone else has failed. I think you might succeed. Why me? Because you looked at a broken watch and saw something worth saving. His eyes met hers. I haven't met many people who see things that way. Ara should have said no. Every instinct told her this was a mistake, that she was out of her depth, that she didn't belong in this world of chandeliers and inherited wealth. But then she thought about the Chronos, about the genius who had created it 130 years ago, pouring his heart into gears and springs that most people would never understand. Broken things had always spoken to her. Maybe this was one of them. When do I start? She asked. 3 weeks later, Ara had established a rhythm. She arrived at Athalgard each morning at 7 o'clock, let herself into the library through the servants' entrance, and worked until midnight, surrounded by boxes and folders that hadn't been touched in decades. The archive was a disaster. Documents filed randomly, correspondence mixed with receipts, original patent applications buried under newspaper clippings from the 1920s. She loved it. For the first time in her career, she had a challenge worthy of her skills. Each day brought new discoveries, new connections, new pieces of a puzzle that was slowly coming into focus. And then there was Elias. He appeared most evenings around 8, settling into a leather armchair with his laptop, working in companionable silence while she sorted through boxes. He brought her coffee, real coffee, not the instant she usually survived on, and asked questions about whatever document she was examining. "What's that?" he asked one night, nodding at the letter in her hands. "A note from Aldrich Thorne to his wife, dated 1889. He's describing a dream about a clock that could measure heartbeats." Era held it to the light. Completely impractical from an engineering standpoint, but the emotional resonance is fascinating. Emotional resonance. It was lonely. She set the letter down. All these documents, hundreds of them, they're full of technical details and business updates. But underneath he keeps asking the same question. Does anyone see me? Does anyone understand? Elias was quiet. That sounds familiar. Era glanced up and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask. Why did you send everyone home at the selection event? 200 women and you dismissed them all." Elias set down his laptop. He walked to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. "Have you ever been evaluated, Miss Vance? Evaluated, measured, assessed, rated according to criteria you had no voice in creating?" He turned to face her. Every woman at that event had been pre-approved based on family connections, physical characteristics, and projected media value. They weren't people. They were portfolios. And I wasn't. You were the only person in that room who forgot I existed the moment something more important needed your attention. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Do you know how rare that is? Meeting someone who doesn't immediately calculate your net worth." Era felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was trying to save a watch. You were trying to save something broken, which is exactly what I'm trying to do with this family." He gestured at the shelves around them. "My great-great-grandfather built an empire. But empires have secrets. I need to know what's buried in these walls before someone else digs it up." "The Briner claim," Era said. Elias's expression sharpened. "You know about it. I found references in the correspondence. A German clockmaker named Heinrich Briner who worked with Aldrich in the 1880s. His descendants are claiming the tourbillon patent was stolen. Can you prove they're wrong?" Era hesitated. "I can find the truth. Whatever it turns out to be. That's all I'm asking." The weeks turned into months. Era found herself settling into Ethelgard the way she had never settled anywhere. Mrs. Holloway, the head housekeeper, left tea outside the library door. Marcus, the groundskeeper, brought flowers from the greenhouse. Even Margaret Chen, the fearsome event coordinator, began nodding to her in hallways. Only one person remained hostile. Vincent Thorne, Elias's uncle. "You're wasting your time," Vincent said one afternoon, appearing in the library doorway. "That documentation doesn't exist. My father searched for years." Era didn't look up. "Perhaps he wasn't looking in the right places. Or perhaps you're just a convenient distraction for my nephew." Vincent's smile showed too many teeth. "Tell me, Miss Vance, what exactly is Elias paying you for? Your professional expertise or something more personal?" The insinuation hung in the air. "I'm here to find the truth," Era said evenly. "Whatever that turns out to be." Vincent laughed. "How naive. In this family, the truth is whatever benefits us most." He left without waiting for a response. Era stared at the empty doorway, her hands trembling. She knew what Vincent saw. A fat girl playing dress-up in a world where she didn't belong. A target. A vulnerability. She had been dealing with men like Vincent her entire life. But something had changed. Something about this house, this project, this connection with a man who had no reason to see her, and saw her anyway. She wasn't going to run. "Mrs. Holloway," Era called. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, concern on her face. "Yes, miss. I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard of a room called the Silent Study?" Mrs. Holloway's expression flickered. "Where did you hear that name?" "A letter from 1891. Aldrich mentioned storing important documents there, but there's no room by that name on any floor plan." The housekeeper was quiet for a long moment, then she glanced over her shoulder. "Follow me," she said. The Silent Study was hidden behind a bookcase on the third floor. The room beyond was small, barely larger than a closet, and thick with dust. A single desk sat against the wall, covered in papers that hadn't been touched in over a century. Ara's heart pounded as she examined the contents. A leather portfolio, Inside, documents in Aldrich Thorne's handwriting, and at the bottom of the stack, a contract dated March 15, 1886. She read it 3 times before she believed what she was seeing. The contract was an agreement between Aldrich Thorne and Heinrich Briner. Briner had designed the tourbillon mechanism. Aldrich had purchased the rights in exchange for 20% of all future profits. The percentage had never been paid. Attached was a letter in Aldrich's hand. If you are reading this, then I have failed. The enclosed documents will destroy everything I have built. But they are the truth, and truth cannot be escaped forever. The Briner family deserves what was promised. I was too afraid to make it right. Perhaps you will find the courage I lacked. Era sat heavily on the dusty floor. She had found the truth, and the truth was that the entire Thorne fortune was built on theft. You're certain? Elias's voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. The documents are authentic. She spread them across his desk. I verified everything. Handwriting, paper composition, ink formulation. This is the original contract signed by both parties, along with Aldrich's personal confession. Silence. The Briner descendants have a legitimate claim, she continued. Everything your family has built rests on a foundation of fraud. Elias laughed. It was not a happy sound. My grandmother is going to kill me, he said. Not metaphorically. Actually kill me. Elias, do you know what this means? The legal battle will take years. The publicity will destroy us. My uncle will use this to have me removed. He stood, pacing to the window. I hired you to save my family. Instead, you've ended it. The words hit like a slap. You hired me to find the truth, Era said quietly. I found it. And what am I supposed to do with it? That's your choice, not mine. They stared at each other across the desk. The billionaire heir and the plus-size archivist, separated by documents that could destroy an empire. You could bury it, Era said finally. Burn the papers. Pretend I never found them. I'd be the only witness. And who would believe me? Would you keep quiet if I asked? Era thought about it. About the money he could offer, the threats he could make, the life she could return to if she just walked away. No, she said, I wouldn't. Elias studied her face for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Good, he said softly. Neither would I. 3 days later, Vincent Thorne made his move. The story hit every major outlet simultaneously. Billionaire secret lover, plus-size insurance worker caught in after-hours trysts at family estate. The photos were damning. Era entering and leaving Athelgard at odd hours. Her car parked overnight. Shadows that could be interpreted as embraces. Quotes from anonymous sources described her as a gold digger, a fetish, a desperate woman who had seduced her way into a fortune. The comments were worse. Look at the size of her. He must be paying by the pound. No way this is real. What billionaire chooses that? She probably drugged him or has blackmail material. Disgusting. Have some self-respect. Era sat in her apartment, phone in hand, watching her reputation shred in real time. The insurance company had already called. Her employment was under review. Her mother had left 6 voicemails. Her sister had texted a single word. Really? The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Elias, soaking wet from the rain, holding a manila envelope. Don't, she said before he could speak. Whatever you're about to offer me, money, a settlement, a gag order, I don't want it. I'm not offering any of those things. Then why are you here? He held out the envelope. Because I need you to see this before I do something that can't be undone. Inside was a press release dated tomorrow. Thorne heir reveals century-old fraud. Announces settlement with Briner descendants. Era read it twice. You're going public in 12 hours. Full disclosure of the original contract, the unpaid royalties, everything. Elias's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. I've agreed to surrender 40% of my personal holdings to the Briner estate. The company will establish a foundation in Heinrich Briner's name. The truth will be acknowledged publicly and permanently. Your grandmother will disown you. She already has. Effective this morning, your uncle will take over the company. He'll try, but I have enough board support to survive. He paused. Era stared at him. Why are you showing me this? Because none of it would exist without you. He took a step closer. You found the truth when everyone else looked away. You refused to bury it when you had every reason to. You showed me that some things are worth more than money or reputation or comfort. Elias, I'm not asking you to come back to Athelgard. I'm not asking for forgiveness or gratitude or anything else. I just needed you to know that your work mattered, that you mattered, that when I stand in front of those cameras tomorrow and admit that my family built its fortune on theft, I'll be thinking of a woman who taught me that broken things aren't garbage. They're just history waiting to be continued. The rain drummed against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. The articles, Era said. The photos. Was that your uncle? Yes. He thought destroying your reputation would make me abandon the disclosure. And did it? It made me move the announcement up by 2 weeks. Elias's jaw tightened. No one attacks the people I care about. Not without consequences. The people I care about. Era felt something crack open in her chest. I'm not what you need, she said. Look at me, Elias. I'm not the woman who stands beside you at press conferences. I'm not the wife your grandmother picked out. I'm a fat girl from nowhere who got lucky with a filing system. You're the woman who saved a 130-year-old watch with a pair of tweezers and a steady hand. You're the woman who looked at my family's legacy and found both its sins and its value. You're the woman who told me the truth when a lie would have been easier. He took another step closer. I have spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted to be with me because of what I could give them. You're the first person who looked at me and saw someone worth actually knowing. You don't know me, not really. Then let me learn. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A fragment of metal barely larger than a fingernail. Era recognized it immediately. The broken piece of the hairspring from the Chronos. I kept it after you stabilized the watch that night. This piece fell loose. I've been carrying it ever since. Why? Because it reminded me of you. He held it up to the light. Tiny, overlooked, absolutely essential to making something beautiful work. Era felt tears prick her eyes. That's the worst metaphor I've ever heard. I know. I'm terrible at this. He was smiling now, that real smile she had seen only a handful of times. But I'm asking anyway. Not for forever. Just for dinner. One dinner where I can sit across from you and pretend I'm just a man who met a woman at a party and couldn't stop thinking about her. People will see us. There will be more photos, more comments. Let them comment. Let them photograph. Let the whole world watch. He extended his hand. I'm done hiding the things that matter. Era looked at his hand, at his face, at the rain streaking down the windows behind him. She thought about all the years she had spent making herself small, all the corners she had hidden in, the attention she had avoided, the spaces she had tried not to occupy. She thought about Aldrich Thorne, hiding his guilt in a secret room for a century. She thought about the Chronos, broken and beautiful, waiting to be repaired. One dinner, she said, and took his hand. 1 year later, the Thorne-Breener Gallery opened on a crisp October morning. Inside, visitors moved through rooms filled with history, original documents, restored artifacts, the full story of two families whose fates had been intertwined for over a century. At the center of the main hall, in a climate-controlled case, sat the Chronos, fully restored. A thin line of gold ran across its face where a crack had been repaired using kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending with gold. The plaque beside it read, "Restored by Era Vance." The gold lines you see are not damage. They are history made visible. Era stood in the back of the gallery watching visitors examine her work. She wore a dress of deep burgundy that made no attempt to hide her curves. Her hair was loose. Her shoulders were straight. You look like you're planning something, Elias said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. I'm planning to steal those cheese puffs before they run out. A worthy goal. He handed her a glass. The reviews are in. They're calling it a meditation on truth and reconciliation. That seems excessive. I thought so, too. He paused. They also mentioned you. Called you the visionary behind the exhibition's narrative. Now they're definitely making things up. Elias laughed. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ara's breath caught. Before you say anything, he said quickly, this isn't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. This is about partnership, about building something real. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a band of rose gold crossed by a single line of yellow gold. Kintsugi, Era whispered. The gold represents everything we've repaired. His voice was rough. I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to let me spend my life loving exactly who you are. The gallery hummed with voices and footsteps. Somewhere a child was asking about the pocket watch. Somewhere time was continuing its eternal march. Yes, Era said. Elias slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The wedding photos went viral, not because of the billionaire groom, but because of the bride. A woman in white who made no attempt to hide her curves. A woman laughing, radiant, taking up exactly as much space as she deserved. The caption that spread across social media was simple. This is what it looks like when someone loves you for who you are. The chronos hung on the wall behind them, its golden repair catching the light. Broken things, it turned out, could be the most beautiful of all.